Hi friends, welcome back to another Renae's Corner video. Somebody asked me to do a video on my research interest and how I sort of fell into clinical psychology, and so I'm gonna kind of combine the two videos because I'm not really sure how it's gonna make sense if I don't tell you like my whole path of like how I got into clinical psychology and how my research interests have shifted over time. And so hopefully it'll be like a timeline sort of thing, and hopefully it makes sense. So we're gonna go back to high school. Back when I was in high school, I really wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a child advocacy lawyer. I had wanted to be a lawyer for years. Like, I was going to summer camps, summer camps where I was learning about law, like constitutional law, and learning how to be a political scientist and learning how to, you know, navigate the political space, because eventually I wanted to go into policy. And yeah, so that's basically my entire life. I wanted to be a lawyer, specifically a child advocacy lawyer. And yeah, so I watched this episode of Oprah. This is gonna sound really fake, but it's real life. I watched this episode of Oprah where she interviewed a little girl with schizophrenia named Janny. She has a channel on here. I'll link it below. Her parents have a channel on here. I'll link it below. But they interviewed Janny, and Janny had a child onset schizophrenia, and I was like intrigued. Like, I was like, what? It was just so fascinating to me, and I was just so interested. I was like Googling stuff. Yeah, I was Googling stuff, and I was like trying to find out more about this. Like I knew what schizophrenia was, but to see it in a kid, like how she described it, was just like, whoa. So I watched that and I was so interested. I took a psychology class in high school, and it literally changed my mind like that. Like, I was like, oh no, I am not being a lawyer. Nope. I was like, I should just be a psychologist. I was like it really like literally blew my mind. Like, I was like, I can do exactly what I want to do, help kids, and I'll have more of a direct impact on helping kids instead of like being a lawyer. Not saying that lawyers don't have direct impact, but the impact that I wanted to have, I was like, how have I not thought of this before? Like, I was so just like, my mind was really blown. I took an amazing psychology class in high school with Mr. Montini, and he literally, like, overnight, I was like, oh no. I was like, lawyer dream gone, out the window. I am going to be a psychologist. And so I basically like shifted my interests, and I took that class like my junior year. So I basically, like, the end of my junior year, I basically shifted my interest, changed all the schools I was gonna apply to, looked for schools that had psychology programs. So fast forward to when I get to Hampton, I decided that I was like, you know, maybe I'll be a family counselor, like a marriage and family counselor. I was like, this sounds good, get a master's degree, sounds great. And I took a like intimate relationships class at Hampton where you learn about marriage and family dynamics. And I was like, oh no, this is not it. So I was like, okay. So I was like, this isn't it. So I was like, this doesn't feel right. So I basically like abandoned that idea, and I was like, okay, so we're still in the psychologist path, but what else can I do? So I was like, okay, so I want to be a therapist. So I was like, So I was like, okay, I'll do a PhD program, because at the time I had no interest in doing research. I took like a research methods class or something, and I was like, yeah, this isn't really what I want to do. I'm not about this life. So I was gonna do a PhD program. So this is like 2014, the end of 2014. My teacher at the time was like, I don't think you should do that route. I think you should get a PhD. And I was like, I am not cut out for a PhD. I literally said this to him. I was like, I'm not cut out for a PhD. I don't even like research. And why would I do that when I could just do the PhD route, which is practice focus, right? And he's like, no, he's like, I don't think that's what you want to do. How about you apply for this internship at Stanford? I took the internship where I got to do research with kids, and my research was really on like education environments and how some educational environments really support Black kids and some education environments don't. And so this was like my first real exposure to like PhD life, and it really like shifted a lot for me. I was like, whoa, like, okay, this research stuff doesn't have to suck. Like, it was really like, I was like, oh, like, okay, so like there are people out here doing research that matters, that has impact on these kids, and you know, is really changing their lives. I had no clue. Like this, it's just like you don't know what you don't know until somebody exposes you to it. And I was like, okay. I was like, so I did that summer at Stanford, and I was like, all right, we're gonna do this PhD thing, but I don't have any research experience. So that same professor that was like, you don't want to do a PsyD, hired me. No, that's not yet. So that next year I took some classes in research classes, and I was like, okay, so then that's like my junior year, I'm like getting good grades, and so I'm like, all right, so I should be good with my grades for this PhD program. But I like complained to this professor that I had no research experience besides this thing at Stanford. He was like, oh, well, you can just come work for me for the summer. And so there I did a different type of research. It was more public health, which the research I did at Stanford wasn't psychology based either. It was more like educational PhD. I don't know, I think it was like an education PhD program and like science education PhD programs there. And so then I did this like public health research thing where we looked at how men who live in rural areas, like how they don't have access to cardiovascular health care, and like what are the barriers to their treatments, and how to like improve their access to care basically. And so this sort of like started my wheels spinning on like what I kind of wanted to do, because not that I was interested in cardiovascular work or men in general, but like just this idea of like going into the community, doing community-based participatory research, going into the communities, figuring out what they need, having partnerships with the community where I'm not like coming in and being like, oh, let me fix you. How can we together fix this problem? And that was like my first exposure to that. Loved it. I was like, okay, I can do this. So then that next year I worked for that program for the whole year, my senior year, and then following my senior year, I worked there that summer afterwards too, where we like, basically it was like a grant writing boot camp, sort of summer camp. And so, not summer camp, but like summer internship program. So at this point I was like, okay, my research interest at this point, I was like, okay, I'm really into kids. I really, I wasn't as into socioeconomic status at the time, but I was like, I'm really into just like kids dynamics and how kids work through race. Like how do kids like understand racism, how do kids understand discrimination, and how do they like process these things. So took a year off, got into Pitt for their post-bac, and so there I was like, okay, here's this experience I have as being like somebody who started out as a poor Black person, a poor Black kid. Parents changed our socioeconomic status by like getting jobs, getting better jobs, putting us in better schools, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, how does that work for kids who aren't as lucky? Because half of the people who are born poor stay poor. So I'm like, how does this really work? Like, how does this sort of dynamic of, you know, this kid growing up poor, how does that translate into them staying poor as an adult? So hopefully that makes sense. I don't know, like sometimes I get caught up in my head, but that's kind of where I was when I started Pittsburgh. And so I was thinking about, at Pittsburgh, I was like, how does socioeconomic status impact these kids who are like in comparison to their white counterparts? So kids who are low SES compared to their white SES, how are they comparing in like social emotional development? So like, how are kids coping, how are Black kids coping that are low SES? How are they coping in comparison to white kids, low SES, and like comparing them across the SES sort of spectrum? And so that's kind of where my heart lies. I'm really interested in how sort of like SES and race interacting, how that sort of shapes this landscape for kids development. That's where I'm really interested in going. Right now, like, my thesis isn't on that. I'm doing some socioeconomic status on racial discrimination, but I don't know, I'm not sure if I want to like go back to working on like this kid research, or if I want to just stay where I'm at, because where I'm at is pretty interesting. Like, the racial discrimination literature is just vast and just very, very interesting to me. So I'm not sure where I'm going, but as of right now, sort of my research is focused on adults, how racial discrimination is affected by socioeconomic status. Like, if you're poor, are you reporting more discrimination because you are, if you're poor, are you reporting more discrimination? Or if you're poor, is the discrimination you're experiencing like worse because you're poor and you already have like this sort of chronic stress in your life? Or is it worse for like black people who are high, you know, because of their status? Like, racial discrimination impacts them more because they are high SES. And so that's sort of where my research is now. And yeah, so clinically though, I really, really want to work with kids. That has never changed. I don't think it's going to change. I recently had a kid case and I loved it. It was so great. And so yeah, so that's where like my research interests are. Clinically, I've always been interested in working with kids. I don't think that's gonna change. I mean, working with adults is cool too, but my heart really lies in working with kids, and that's not gonna change. So yeah, so that's basically it. Those are basically like my path to the PhD, how my research interests have changed and shifted over time, my clinical interests. And yeah, so one of the cool things about being a researcher is like, I have all these like other ideas about things that I could potentially research, and it's just like, it's fun because like you get a chance to be creative and like think about things in a different way, especially in a PhD program, because, you know, one of the things that my advisor says to me all the time is that a PhD program, you're like creating knowledge, and so the stuff you are interested in might exist in like this one domain, but how you extrapolate from that and how you create your own knowledge from that, it's just like a lot of creativity, a lot of research and stuff to back up what you're saying. But like, yeah, so yeah, I think my research interests obviously are going to change and shift more as I get older. I mean, just like as I go through the PhD program, but as of right now, that's what they are. As of, let's say, July 20th, that's what they are. And yeah, so I think mainly my research interests are surrounding like communities and how like socioeconomic status impacts Black people. And yeah, I think it's very important research, and it's really near and dear to my heart. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. So if you have watched this far, leave a book emoji, because I have just finished Memories of a Geisha, and I've been trying to read that book for years. And so leave a book emoji. And yeah, if you have any questions about my research interest, any questions about any research interest, or how you sort of develop a research interest, please comment below. I'd be happy to share like how I've sort of changed and grown with my research interests. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you to everybody who is subscribed already. It's like crazy how many of you are subscribed to this channel. It's like mind-blowing to me. And yeah, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I think I said that already. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I will see you all next week. Peace.